This boy suffered the greatest injustice of all, and because of that, they are all going to pay. They laughed at him for being weak and having no talent for magic. In this world, anyone without talent faces a horrible future, but Verdun possessed intelligence, and for that, everyone envied him. His dream was always to be a great mage, just like the Magic Tower Master. The MC dedicated himself to the max and studied more than anyone. Thanks to that, he invented something extraordinary for mages. His professor said Verdun was a great genius and would become famous, but he betrayed him, stole his research, and presented it as his own. Verdun, in despair, went to the Tower Master and reported everything, hoping to get credit for his years of work. But unfortunately, Balrog Beshes, upon hearing that the boy was a genius smarter than everyone else even without magic talent, imprisoned him. He turned the protagonist into a guinea pig for magic experiments. In the Bohemia Magic Tower, the most powerful in the Empire, the Tower Master and his talented students used Verdun to test dangerous spells and magic potions. The reason for such injustice was simply because he was so intelligent even without magical talent. For that, he must pay. After years, anyone would have had their spirit broken, but Verdun filled himself with a more powerful sentiment, the same one Itachi placed in his brother. While imprisoned, the boy had only the memories of his childhood friend. He and Rovelin swore they would become great mages together. They made a promise, and that memory was burning in his mind. He cannot break that promise. So if in this world talent surpasses intelligence, Verdun convinces himself, perhaps he can transform his intelligence into talent, break the limits and surpass everything and everyone. For 7 years, he dedicated himself to a new theory that will change the world. When he was in his cell, he practiced every day. Despite being a prisoner, the mage forced Verdun to work in the tower, doing cleaning duty. His friend Rovelin always visited him and one day, told him she was moving to another place and asked him to run away with her. The truth is she doesn't know the truth about how Verdun lives in the magic tower. Verdun refused. He cannot run away. He has plans for the people of this place. On that same day, people were enjoying the magic festival. This will be the ideal moment for his revenge. Verdun went to the treasure room and claimed the tower master ordered him to clean the place. This is where the master's greatest invention is kept, a magic amplification artifact. Verdun worked for 7 years to figure out how to break the seal and use the artifact. In the room housing the tower's energy source, 2 mages were on guard duty on the day of the magic festival, so they were irritated. Verdun discreetly entered the room and began his final plan. The bearded mage didn't even know how he died. The green-haired mage was stunned by what he saw and questioned how a piece of trash without talent has the nerve to attack a mage. He was determined to eliminate Verdun, but what happened was astonishing. The MC used a powerful 3rd-level spell, and it was fatal. The mage was defeated. When he had only a few seconds of life left, Verdun warned him. It would have been better to treat people with more care. After taking care of the guards, the protagonist was facing the heart of the tower. The energy core is the most important thing of all. He is going to use its mana to execute the spell that will defy the heavens and break logical limits. Using the artifact and the tower's mana core, Verdun drew all the magic circles and activated the spell. There are 2 results. Either it will work, or he will die. Even kilometers away, the tower master saw the blue light reaching the heavens. The mage knew his magic tower was in that direction. Balrog flew as fast as possible, thinking he would destroy whoever was responsible. Upon arriving, he saw only the mage's silhouette. It didn't matter to him if it was the emperor himself or a great mage. He was going to destroy him. When he tried to strike him, all Balrog found was a teleportation magic circle. The strongest mage in the empire was unable to discover who destroyed his tower, and soon he is going to lose more than just his tower.
Nice.
Elsewhere, the morning dawned peacefully in a sunlit forest. In this environment, the sound of flowing water began to catch his attention. With a sudden plunge, he fell abruptly into a river. Sitting on the bank, he tried to understand where he was and how he got there. Looking at his reflection in the water, he realized that his appearance had been completely altered. Even without understanding, he touched his face, trying to recognize himself. Faced with the transformation, he questioned whether the body reconstruction process had turned him into another person. At that moment, he remembered encountering the wizards, challenging the heavens, and escaping with teleportation magic before being caught. Finally, he concluded that this was how he ended up in that unfamiliar forest. Noticing the different vegetation, he understood that he had never been there and that the plants were not the same as those in the tower. With that, he smiled, realizing that the teleportation had successfully taken him to the other side of the continent. Thus, he celebrated having executed his transformation plan and escaped using the magic circle. Lying on the grass, he began to laugh at the thought of the master's fury, certain that no one would discover his identity. Despite the victory, he acknowledged that his attack had not been enough to completely bring down the magical tower. Still, he recalled that the enemies certainly had countermeasures and did not earn the title of the Omnipotent by chance. Even so, he decided that the plan had worked for now and that he would use the tower's reconstruction time to strengthen himself for revenge. With his hand raised to the sky, he swore to destroy everything the master had built, so that the name Verdun would be etched in history. After determining that revenge and self-affirmation were his only purpose, he stretched and mentally bid farewell to the tower for the time being. Not far away, a goblin struck a wooden box with its axe. Without wasting time, Verdun extended his hand and conjured the wind cutter spell. The blade of air advanced and sliced the goblin in half before the creature realized the danger. As he walked, he analyzed his hand and concluded that the sensation of using magic remained the same. He deduced that, although the reconstruction had changed his hair and eyes, his mana capacity had remained unchanged. Kicking the body aside, he understood that, due to the presence of goblins, he must be far from any village. At that moment, marks beside the box caught his attention. Kneeling, he identified tracks of a cart and deduced that someone had hastily abandoned the cargo. With the intention of finding the owner, Verdun decided to use mana detection on the box. As soon as he activated the spell, a trail of energy shot out following the marks left by the vehicle. Further ahead, a man urges the horses to run as fast as possible. In panic, the driver tries to understand how he ended up in that situation. A memory shows him surrounded by bandits who should have already been exterminated. Another memory reveals that neither the mention of a baron nor the escape of his mercenaries were the real problem. What truly terrified him was the appearance of an orc with a macabre smile among the bandits. He recalls the luck he had in escaping while the orc was distracted massacring the others. Back in the present, a loud sound startles him, making him believe he is being pursued. Desperate, he whips the horses to make them run even faster. Suddenly, the cart's wheel hits a root and brakes, causing the vehicle to stop abruptly. With the impact, the driver is violently thrown to the ground. Trying to get up, he supports himself on his back, panting and in pain. At that moment, he turns alert upon sensing a presence approaching. Ahead, dozens of pairs of eyes appear in the darkness of the forest. Orcs and goblins emerge from the shadows and surround him, leading him to lament his fate. Without delay, the creatures charge all at once. Certain that everything was over, the man simply closes his eyes and waits for the blow. In the last instant, a massive wall of earth rises from the ground, blocking the creature's attack. Observing the scene, Verdun comments that he forgot to leave an opening for the man to breathe. Thus, the orc leader turns and stares intently at the newcomer. From atop the rock, he decides that he needs to eliminate all the monsters before the victim runs out of air. While concentrating a flame in his hand, he views that moment as his first real battle. In response, the orc leader roars and charges forward with the other monsters. With a smile, he realizes that this is the perfect opportunity to test his new combat skills. Thus, multiple fire arrows rain down on the monsters, decimating the first wave of attack. As the flames spread, the orc leader remains standing, completely unharmed by the spell. Then, with a roar, the creature orders the surviving goblins to advance toward the wizard. As soon as they receive the command, the enemies run and begin to climb the rock to reach the conjurer. For his part, the young man prepares to invoke 2 spells at once, combining fire arrows and whirlwind. Using the double casting technique, he merges the 2 magical circles into one. Then, the sorcerer points downward and activates the heat wave arrow against the enemies. Soon, a massive explosion of fire consumes all the goblins that were advancing. After the attack, the charred bodies of the creatures begin to disintegrate into ashes. In light of the result, the young man reflects that he wouldn't have been able to defeat a single goblin before. Looking at the battlefield, he confirms that none of the smaller monsters survived. With that, he decides to turn back to the wall of earth, determined to free the man before he runs out of air. Suddenly, the hand of the orc leader emerges from behind the rock and reaches toward him. Before he could react, the wizard turns in complete shock. Some time later, the now repaired cart travels peacefully down the road. Inside the vehicle, the man who introduces himself as Conrad promises that he will never forget what happened. With that, he thanks his savior for protecting his life and wonders how he can repay the favor. Not giving it much importance, the conjurer merely warns him to keep his eyes on the road, or he will tip the cart again. Soon after, Conrad asks if he was in danger during the fight against the monsters. With his eyes closed, the young man thinks that the situation was only a little dangerous. Then, a quick memory makes him recall the exact moment he noticed the attack from the surviving orc. The recollection shows the creature from behind as it prepared a spell up close. Thus, using the wind cutter, he managed to slice the monster in half before being crushed. Back in the present, the wizard smiles and assures Conrad that there is nothing to worry about. Shortly after, he asks about the frequency of thieves in the area, as they tend to avoid places with monsters. With that, the traveler explains that the forest is under the control of Baron Pythe, and that the thieves should have been defeated. For this reason, he traveled without mercenaries, leading the conjurer to conclude that his teleportation took him to the right territory. Even with his tracks erased, he decides that he will need to hide his identity and grow stronger in case he is sought after. When questioned by Conrad, he realizes that he had not introduced himself yet. With that, he formally reveals himself as Asher, deciding that he will only use the name Verdun again when facing the master of the tower. Soon the cart arrives at its destination, the estate of the Baron of the Paith territory. As soon as they arrive, the local noble questions Conrad about what happened upon seeing him in that state. In response, the man jokes that he must have lost weight while fleeing from the orcs. Finally, the Baron apologizes for the incident, but Conrad reassures him, saying it was not his fault. Then, the noble identifies the young mage as the one responsible for saving his friend and states that he cannot stand idly by in light of such a feat. With that, the Baron gives the order for the guest to be taken to the castle. Now in new clothes, the young man formally thanks him for the hospitality, the clothes, and the food. The noble then accepts the thanks with a smile. Shortly after, he introduces himself as Baron Henrod, the lord of that territory, and invites him to sit down. During dinner, the host asks if the food is to the guest's liking, receiving a positive response. As a reward for saving Conrad, the Baron offers him the sum of 5 million elk. Additionally, he takes the opportunity to propose a job with good pay. After considering the offer, the guest sets his fork down on the table and asks what the job entails. The Baron begins to explain that, days ago, bodies of residents from a neighboring town were found in the southern forest. Even with the town in ruins, the investigation found no traces of the culprits, as if everything had been erased by magic. Faced with the speculation of a mage among the bandits, the young man interrupts and asks when they plan to hunt them down. With a smile, the Lord answers his question. 4 days later, the conjurer joins the hunting group gathered at the castle gate, ready for the mission. Soon, a knight approaches and introduces himself as Enoch, the commander in charge of the plan. Then, Enoch introduces his companions Harris and Peric, who greet the newcomer enthusiastically. Returning the gesture, the young man shakes the commander's hand and formally introduces himself to the group. While reflecting on the Baron's proposal, he decides to accept the job of hunting bandits as payment for his stay. Noticing a large group of people gathered, he asks Enoch if they are also part of the plan. The commander then explains that they are adventurers, drawn by rumors of the recent appearance of a strange orc. With that, he adds that the good reward has attracted even gold-rank adventurers. The mage recalls that adventurers of that level are veterans comparable to knights, capable of using energy to strengthen their bodies and weapons. Already in the forest, he questions the need for his presence as the group already has 3 knights and other warriors. At that moment, Enoch asks him to alert if he detects a mage, making him suspect the true reason for his hiring. In response, the commander explains that a mage's long-range spells make it very difficult for the knights to approach. With that, the young man states that the situation is unfortunate, leaving the group leader completely on alert. Soon after, he stops in the middle of the path, causing everyone to halt their march along with him. Then, the conjurer extends his hand and warns that there is a magical circle ahead, just before using the disperse spell. With the magic, a huge trap hidden in the air is revealed to everyone. The group members react in surprise, wondering how something like that could exist there. Soon, the mage explains that the spell served as camouflage and a warning for the user, asking everyone to stay back. Without hesitation, he concentrates energy between his hands and fires a spell that opens a direct path through the forest. Enoch watches the scene completely surprised. Given the ease with which the magic was undone, the commander questions the true identity of the young man. Thus, the explorers are members of guilds that accept missions to explore territories or repel monsters that threaten people. Even with death always nearby, an adventurer's skill is admired for bringing wealth and fame. Over time, some become so strong that they lose control and abandon their honor to attack other humans. In the end, they become nothing more than bandits, like the leader of the group who laments his situation in the forest. Next to a carcass, the chief complains that the damages from the last attack have not yet been resolved and that they are now out of food. With that, he orders his men to stop watching and immediately go out to hunt something to eat. Hidden in the brush, the knights identify the group as their target and wait for Commander Enoch's orders. As soon as the leader of the warriors decides to attack to take advantage of the enemy's low guard, the mage stops him and asks him to wait a moment. Then he reminds him that they have not yet assessed the enemy's strength and that they could lose if the rival conjurer is stronger. Even so, Enoch shows concern about the possibility of the bandits starting to move. In light of the situation, the young man claims there is a way to resolve the impasse while observing the enemies. While one of the criminals, Varja, complains about the effort to expand the area and about the dead recruit, the sorcerer tells him to stop. With a sigh, Varja laments that an orc has killed his subordinates and reflects on how his life has changed since he became a bandit. Soon, he suggests to Vilshin that they attack another village, but the mage refuses the idea due to the Baron's wrath. Vilshin then reveals that it is time for them to move and that he has heard of a nearby town called Martz. As he planned to loot the village, a fire spell was shot in his direction. Shortly after, a strong explosion erupted in the bandits' camp. Faced with the surprise attack, Vilshin conjured a defense circle and confirmed that it was indeed magic. With the certainty that they had been discovered, the group of knights and adventurers charged into combat. Immediately, the battlefield turned into a chaotic confrontation between the two sides. Amid the confusion, one of the adventurers managed to strike Vilshin on the head with a blow. Seeing the scene, Varja turned in shock towards his fallen companion. The leader of the outlaws then analyzed that the mana barrier, despite being quick, was fragile and that its breakage impacted the user. With the mage defeated, the young conjurer presented himself before Enoch and offered to take care of the rest of the battle. Thus, Varja realized that the Baron was truly determined to eliminate them, as he had hired a mage. Even so, he refused to accept the plan and crossed swords directly with Commander Enoch. With that, he swore he would send their heads as a response to the Baron, receiving a challenge from Enoch in return. During the confrontation, the young conjurer chased Vilshin through a ravine while the enemy tried to escape. While fleeing, the bandit realized that his pursuer was using the earth wall, concluding that he was a mage. From below, Vilshin questioned his opponent's delay and decided to attack first, casting multiple ice arrows. Confident that he was facing only a second circle mage, he advanced to eliminate him before fleeing. In response, the young man engulfed himself in flames and counterattacked with the spell multiple fire arrows. After the smoke cleared, the battlefield was covered in particles of magic under the sunset light. Kneeling and wounded, Vilshin acknowledged the strength of his opponent but claimed he had chosen the wrong enemy. As the hunter approached, the mage assured him that, without the knight, he could defeat him alone and escape. Just ahead, the adversary stated that he had no intention of letting him flee. With that, Vilshin praised his enemy's confidence and talent with complex magic. He then threatened him and prepared a new spell to end the battle. Vilshin then conjured the third circle magic, Falling Ice, materializing a huge mass of ice. With the order to die, the ice was launched towards his rival, who merely observed the attack. Suddenly, a massive ice cube formed on the ground, trapping the opposing mage inside it. Not understanding what had happened, the bandit found himself unable to move within the prison. Outside, 2 columns of earth crossed over the ice cube, completely sealing the trap. Trapped, Vilshin could not believe that his spell had been blocked while the other watched him from outside. Soon after, the conjurer raised his hand and invoked the spell Earth Spear. With a simple clenching of his fist, he activated the attack. With that, multiple earth spears erupted from the ground and pierced the ice prison from all sides. Vilshin questioned how a second circle mage could use a third circle magic. In response, the rival merely challenged him to guess how that was possible. Vilshin then realized that he was not only facing someone capable of casting third circle spells, but also someone who mastered 4 different attributes. At the moment he understood, he had been deceived from the start. An earth spear struck him. After the battle, the victor merely observed the body of his fallen opponent under the sunset light. He concluded that his journey there was worth it. After all, that fight taught him how to combat other mages. Soon after, near the lake, a strangely appearing creature emerged, smiling amidst a field of bodies. Days earlier, the young man recalled having created an experimental potion he called Magic Circuit Delator. Then he fell to the ground writhing after ingesting the substance. Thanks to this, he reached the third circle while energy flowed from his eyes. Back in the present, he observed the body of the mage, thinking about how to prove his feat to the Baron. Soon his attention was drawn to the wand that the bandit had used during the fight. Then he knelt down and used an appraisal magic on the object. The analysis revealed it to be a magical stone wand that reduced casting time and increased the effectiveness of ice spells. At that moment, Peric rushed to the scene, relieved to find him safe. The knight explained his concern, while the young man justified his delay due to the strength of the opponent. When asking about the other bandits, the ally confirmed that they had been defeated and that Enoch was still fighting against the leader. Before they left, the young knight allowed him to ask a question. Holding the wand, he wanted to know what should be done with the bandits' belongings. Peric replied that by order of the Baron, he could keep any item that interested him. With that, the mage thought of Baron Pate's generosity and decided he would make good use of the wand. Once reunited with the knights, he was congratulated for his good work, responding that it had been a great experience. Amidst the group, the leader of the bandits, Varja, reacted with disbelief at the news of Vilshin's death. Aware that he would be executed, he prepared a hidden blade to try to escape. With a sudden movement, he freed himself from his bindings, initiating his escape attempt. Soon after, he charged forward, spinning his blades against the knights to clear a path. Thus, he ran directly at Enoch, knowing he would only have one chance. His attack with the blade was promptly blocked by the commander's sword. Seizing the opportunity, Enoch disarmed him with a throwing technique that sent him flying. In the midst of his fall, Varja saw the enemy throw his own sword aside. As soon as he landed, he was immobilized by 2 knights while the commander questioned him about discarding his weapon. With a smile, Enoch drew a dagger and responded with a question. Then he positioned the dagger at the bandit's neck, explaining that pride is something only for the living. After executing the leader, the warrior stepped away from the body and apologized to the others for the scene. The commander then justified himself to the mage, who congratulated him on the impressive work. Seeing the prisoners, the young man questioned Enoch about why he was leaving them alive, receiving the explanation that they could be survivors. Therefore, the knight planned to take the prisoners to the castle to confirm their identities before deciding their fates. Next, Harris ordered everyone to prepare to return, instructing the knights to move the bandits. While one of them was forced to stand up, another watched the scene with suspicion. Suddenly, this prisoner turned and ran towards the forest, screaming that he didn't want to die. Seeing the escape, Harris declared that he would take care of him and prepared to advance. At that moment, Asher interrupted him, stating that something strange was happening. As soon as the fleeing bandit turned, pleading for help, Asher reacted immediately. Soon, Harris also sensed a different presence and identified the strong smell of blood in the air. The entire group then turned, looking in the direction the man was running. In the blink of an eye, the prisoner's head was thrown towards Harris. Everyone went on high alert upon spotting the figure of an orc in the forest, not understanding what was happening. Asher quickly connected the dots and concluded that this was the creature the adventurers had failed to defeat. Shortly after, a massive orc charged forward with an axe in hand, displaying an even more threatening appearance. Using a detection magic, Asher noticed dozens of similar creatures approaching. That colossal figure, with red eyes, seemed to be the leader of the horde. Asher recognized him as the evolved version of the smiling orc that had spied on the previous battle. With a gesture, the orc pointed forward and ordered his goblins and minions to attack. Immediately, Enoch commanded the knights to take defensive positions and focus on the goblins. The orc leader advanced with a devastating strike, which was directly blocked by Enoch's sword. With the impact, the knight was thrown back by the force of the attack. While Enoch was still on the ground, the creature raised its foot to crush him. At the last moment, two soldiers rushed in and blocked the monster's stomp. Seizing the chance, Enoch lunged forward and made a deep cut in the creature's chest. The orc fell under the watchful eyes of the knights. Even spitting blood, the leader maintained his smile. Soon after, he grabbed a goblin that was beside him. To everyone's astonishment, he simply devoured the creature. With that, the wound on his chest completely closed. Observing that regeneration, Enoch concluded that they would not be able to return to the castle safely. As soon as Enoch ordered everyone to prepare for battle, the orc smiled with his weapon in hand. Immediately, the creature hurled its giant blade towards the knights. Thus, the weapon flew directly at Harris, who braced for impact. However, the knight managed to block the projectile with his own sword at the last moment. With the force of the blow, Harris's blade shattered into several pieces. Next, the shards of the destroyed sword flew directly at his face. Then the fragments hit him squarely, piercing his skin. With that, the warrior's body was thrown back with the violence of the attack. Seeing the scene, Perrick shouted the name of his fallen companion. At that moment, Enoch warned him to be careful, as the enemy was already in front of him. Thus, the young knight advanced and delivered a precise cut against the creature. However, his expression changed to one of complete surprise, for he realized that the sword had become lodged in the orc's muscles, which contracted to immobilize it. While Perrick futilely tried to free his weapon, the adversary reached out to capture him. Suddenly, Asher used a skill and struck the monster with some stones. At the last moment, the mage called Perrick to him. Then the knight slid to safety, relieved to have survived the imminent attack. Soon, he lamented not being able to recover his weapon, while Asher explained that the orc's strength increased after consumption. Thus, the young man remembered having used all his energy in the attack, questioning whether the creature was a legendary entity. However, Asher denied the theory, leaving the knight surprised by the answer given the enemy's strength, for the creature was indeed different from a common orc, as it could regenerate, command subordinates, and subjugate warriors. Even so, the mage considered the monster too weak to be classified as a special entity. Then he recalled the rule of magic, which imposes a limit on common mana, but a specific spell does not have this restriction. With that, he began to conjure the magic of geographic manipulation, forming a magical circle in his hands. Next, a wave of energy expanded from him, causing the entire battlefield to tremble. At that moment, the knights lost their balance with the tremor, while one of them believed that everyone would die there. Then, Enoch ordered them to remain calm and hold their positions, as that was Asher's magic. Even having given the order, the commander stood atop a rock pillar observing the outcome. After all, the spell had raised the ground beneath their feet, isolating them from the horde of monsters that became trapped in the abyss below. Soon, the mass of creatures was crushed as the ground violently rose beneath their feet. From atop the pillar, the knights watched the body of the fallen leader at the bottom of the abyss. Then Asher prepared a third circle spell, conjuring a large fireball. Shortly after, the flaming sphere descended like a meteor onto the remaining monsters in the valley. As Perrick celebrated the attack, Enoch asked him to maintain his dignity, but the young man replied that it was satisfying. However, the mage reflected that geographic manipulation has no limits of expansion, but its mana cost makes it impractical. Even so, he was disappointed with the result, as he expected greater power than that of a third circle spell. Suddenly, a roar from the bottom of the abyss interrupted his thoughts and drew everyone's attention. Even amidst the flames, the creature was still alive, devouring another goblin to regenerate. Then, Perrick questioned him about what to do, while Asher decided that if the monster did not die from the fire, he would try something else. With that, he conjured a wave of water that descended over the abyss, extinguishing the fire and hitting the orc. Soon after, he jumped from the rock pillar with his wand in hand, while the young man shouted his name. During the fall, the mage prepared 2 ice spells simultaneously for a combined attack. Then he launched a barrage of reinforced arrows that advanced directly against the orc leader. Thus, the strike hit the creature squarely, completely freezing it in a large block of ice along with its minions. Before the paralyzed enemy, Asher activated a magical circle on the ground while the adversary tried to break free. As soon as he landed, he concluded that regeneration would be useless if the body was completely immobilized. Soon, he ran past the creature to finish the confrontation once and for all. With the monster smiling, the conjurer prepared a new sphere of energy in his wand. Then he launched a frozen orb directly at the target. The impact completely froze the orc, and he declared the conquest complete. Meanwhile, the bustling magical city of Irisent continued its routine. There, 2 men were conversing on a balcony about the latest news circulating. One of them commented on the ceiling of the magic tower and the explosion of its energy source, questioning the truth of the story. At the same time, a group of mages discussed the disappearance of the tower's members and the extent of the damage. For public speculations varied between divine punishment and a planned disaster, but scholars had their own theories. Then one of the hooded mages concluded that someone must have prepared the ceiling of the Boemern Tower. With that, the mustached man whispered a rumor about secret experiments that would have provoked an attack on the tower. Upon hearing the information, the hooded figure reacted instantly, spilling his coffee. He then grabbed the man by the collar and demanded that he repeat what he said, leaving him completely confused. Suddenly, the red-haired mage, Rovalyn, removed her hood, asking what had happened. In a serious tone, she completed the question, demanding to know what happened to the Boemern Magic Tower. Back in the Baron's domain, the return of the subjugation team was celebrated with a toast. As soon as the mission against the bandits ended, they returned to the castle, where Pathy offered a banquet in their honor. During the feast, the noble congratulated everyone for their work and noted Asher's absence. Soon after, he noticed the wizard approaching and announced his arrival to the guests. Then he entered the hall accompanied by Conrad, asking if he had arrived too late. With that, the Baron welcomed him with a glass of wine, assuring him that he arrived at just the right time. After thanking him, the conjurer commented on the presence of soldiers at the banquet, and the host replied that social status did not matter. The feudal lord then changed the subject, questioning about the unusual strength of the bandits they faced. While drinking, Asher agreed that with that level of skill, they wouldn't need to steal to survive. Soon, an assistant handed a document to the Baron, who offered it to the guests so he could understand the situation. Thus, the report revealed that the leaders of the bandits were wanted criminals, former gold-rank adventurers who fled after killing their companions. Upon reading the document, Asher finally understood the reason for the high bounty of 10 million elk on their heads. Then he realized why the Baron seemed so pleased, as the damage would have been severe without his help. Suddenly, he noticed the host staring at him with a strange expression and asked why. In response, Pathy praised him for taking care of the bandits and the monster, revealing that the Adventurers Guild sent their thanks. The Baron apologized for getting carried away and composed himself. He then solemnly thanked the wizard for rescuing the villagers and allowing the victims to have proper funerals. Shortly after, he raised his glass and proposed a toast to the sorcerer who saved the territory of Pate. With that, everyone in the hall raised their cups and toasted in honor of Sir Asher. The banquet that followed had a different atmosphere from the Magic Tower, with everyone enjoying themselves together. Thus, that warm and unpretentious place contrasted with the cold treatment he was used to receiving. For the first time since escaping the tower, Peric pulled him to drink with the others. With that, the conjurer managed to smile genuinely while holding the mug. Far away, Rovalyn watched the Boemern Magic Tower, unaware of the turmoil its collapse would bring. Seeing the structure intact, she concluded that the rumors were exaggerated, until someone called her. Then, a man returning from Isekai confirmed he had heard about the energy source, but commented that the building looked fine. Rovalyn interrupted him to ask directly where Verdun was. Not knowing how to respond, the traveler simply pointed to a bulletin board where a crowd was gathered. On the board, there was a large list with the names of the missing people. Upon understanding the situation, her expression changed completely as she looked at the list. Then, Rovalyn observed the mural with the photos, stopping in disbelief in front of Verdun's face. For the notice stated that Verdun, the missing number 31, had been exposed to the energy source and his body had not been found. With that, she remembered their last conversation when he promised he would be there waiting for her return. Thus, the image of Verdun smiling shattered in her mind, along with the possibility of never seeing him again. Then, the mage covered her face with her hands, beginning to collapse to the ground. Suddenly, an aura of red energy exploded around her as she screamed, refusing to accept that loss. Soon, the explosion intensified, releasing all her anguish in a final scream. At that moment, a hand touched her head while a voice told her to stop, as it wouldn't change anything. Thus, Rovalyn lifted her gaze and recognized the man in front of her as Lord Valdic. Kneeling on the ground, she asked him what exactly had happened at the Magic Tower. While helping her to stand, Valdic explained that the energy source went mad and annihilated everyone in the central area. Moreover, all data, research records, and even the magic circle of the vault were destroyed. The master of the tower then lamented the immeasurable loss of the second circuit, the books, and the artifacts. However, the most lamentable loss for him was that of Subject 77, as his brain could have restored the lost result. Back to Rogalin, Valdic placed his hand on her shoulder and revealed that he had found clues about the culprit who escaped. Thus she questioned him, and the elder explained that someone had disappeared 3 hours before the incident and was tracked with the help of other magical towers. As a result of the investigation, he revealed a necklace with a red triangular emblem that he had discovered. As soon as she saw it, the mage recognized it as the emblem of the organization known as Black Hour. For the Black Hour was a secret group that not only researched magic but used it as a means to govern the world. Valdic then confirmed that they were involved in the incident, although he did not know how they had infiltrated. He then announced the creation of an extermination unit and offered Rogalin a place on the team. With that, the sorceress crushed the emblem in her hand with all her strength. As she knelt with her eyes glowing red, Valdic understood that he already had his answer. Days later, at the Adventurers Guild in the domain of Pate, an officer received Asher for a conversation. Thus, the representative began the meeting by formally apologizing to Sir Asher for the incident. He then explained that the guild had underestimated the danger of the orc, even after the failure of the gold rank adventurers. Relieved by Asher's understanding, the man handed over the certificate with the reward for the subjugation. Thus, the document detailed a total reward of 24 million elk, but the final amount after taxes was only 12 million. However, the officer justified that the 50% fee for non-members was an imperial law that could not be ignored. With that, he revealed with a smile that there was only one legal way to avoid the taxation, and the warrior deduced that it involved becoming an adventurer. Soon, the deduction was confirmed with enthusiasm when the officer explained that, due to being a special case, he could start directly at silver rank to reduce the taxes. Still, even with the insistence to sign the form, the young man set down his cup, aware that becoming an adventurer would restrict his future actions. Finally, he interrupted the man with a smile and asked for the payment to be processed that way, as his priority was to strengthen himself for his revenge. In the warehouse of the Adventurers Guild, he prepared to conduct his research. With that, he removed the sheet covering the body of the orc variant to begin a thorough investigation. Soon he realized that the fabric was a preservation artifact, something he did not expect to find in that guild. Upon analyzing the body, he noted that the condition of the corpse was far from ideal for research. Thus, the analysis revealed that, in addition to the red pupils and skin, the torn mouth and the muscular physique were its most striking characteristics. Even so, such traits did not correspond to those of superior species, and its intelligence was not exceptional, leading him to classify it as a mutation. Despite the conclusion, something about that classification seemed incomplete. After all, the mutation alone did not explain the regeneration and monstrous strength obtained through consumption. Suddenly, his attention was drawn to a specific detail on the creature's neck. That mark appeared to be a scar. The orc's regeneration was able to restore a burned body, but it could not heal that small wound. With that, he concluded that the regenerative ability must have been acquired after the creature received that scar. In fact, it was the mark of an incision, a method to acquire powers after birth that, until then, was only possible through evolution. Therefore, the most likely conclusion was that someone had created that variant artificially, which represented the worst possible scenario. As he prepared to leave, the investigator told Conrad and his companion that they did not need to accompany him for the farewell. However, Conrad insisted that it was the least he could do since his life had been saved. At that moment, the traveler showed the ring and the cloak he had received, stating that he already had more than enough as a reward. Both confirmed that it was a well-deserved reward, and he thanked them for the words. Soon he said goodbye to continue on his way while they wished him well until they met again. As he was walking away, he heard Conrad shout that he would have the support of the Merchant Guild Conrad in any city he visited. Thus, he continued his route into the forest. His journey took him to the village on the border between the Pate territory and the barony of Martis. As soon as he arrived, he dispelled the flight spell while consulting a map he had with him. The map confirmed that this was the only village on the way between the city and the barony. While buying an apple, he planned to rest there so that the timing of his journey would be perfect. As he bit into the fruit, he heard whispers coming from a group of men nearby. Observing the conversation, he realized that he could obtain some useful information there. Then he cast a wind spell to listen, discovering that the main problem was the goblins. The conversation revealed that the creatures had taken all the livestock, forcing them to hire adventurers, although one of them thought they could solve it on their own. One of the men confirmed that, by order of the chief, the problem with the goblins would be resolved by the adventurers by the next morning. For the villagers, goblins were pests that started with small thefts but could escalate to attacks that destroyed entire villages. Therefore, hiring adventurers was the standard response to the situation, something that did not seem unusual. Soon after, the conversation shifted to a rumor about a monster that a man named James had supposedly seen in the forest. Despite the village chief's order to keep quiet about the matter, one of them decided to tell the story anyway. Thus, the narrative began days earlier when James went to the forest to check the traps he had set up as usual. While he was there, he heard the sound of a boar screaming and turned to see what it was. Before him stood a goblin with a torn mouth, larger than an orc, devouring the boar. Fearing that the adventurers would charge extra, one of the men requested silence, and with that, the traveler dispelled his listening magic. That unexpected information about a large goblin with a torn mouth caught his attention. Then he smiled upon realizing that it was a coincidence hard to ignore. Meanwhile, in the nearby forest, the hunt for the goblins had already begun. With a precise throw, a spear flew through the air and struck one of the goblins squarely. Behind the bushes, the two hired adventurers watched the outcome of the attack. At that moment, the archer Myrna asked her partner, Loke, if he had improved his skills. Shortly after, Loke teased her about the hit, but the leader Iris intervened, reminding them to stay focused on the mission. With that, Mild asked the commander if she had found any signs of the goblins. Then she pointed to a nearby cave, identifying it as the likely lair of the creatures. As they gathered, Iris explained that the bone totems were a symbol of hobgoblins, and that the cave's terrain was the main danger. Next, the leader ordered to destroy the totems and traps before entering, and the others agreed. Soon after, Iris cast an enhanced vision spell, causing Myrna to notice a sudden change in her sight. Following that, the leader confirmed that now everyone could see in the dark without needing torches, being praised for her reliability. With the preparations completed, Iris signaled for the group to advance into the dark cave. However, before entering, she suddenly stopped, and Myrna questioned her about what was wrong. Still, the leader replied that it was nothing, although she had the impression of sensing a mana presence nearby. Finally, the forest surrounding the cave remained silent for a moment. Inside a dark cave, a source of light indicated the way deeper. Just ahead, some goblins were performing a ritual around a campfire. Suddenly, one of them did not notice a glimmer coming from the darkness of the tunnel. In the next instant, an arrow pierced the head of one of the creatures, to the surprise of the one beside it. With that, the adventurers quickly advanced into combat. At that moment, the two warriors entered the fray, cutting down the goblins with their swords. Meanwhile, the archer commented that everything seemed to be going well, but the mage warned her not to let her guard down. After the fight, the group gathered to observe the dark passage just ahead. At that time, Myrna offered to explore the path, while Iris asked her to be careful and send a signal. As she advanced, the young woman found a path littered with goblin bodies scattered on the ground. Suddenly, her expression turned serious. Then, the swordsman asked what was wrong, and she replied that she had just heard something strange. From the shadows, an unknown silhouette slowly revealed itself. Soon after, a huge creature rose from the ground. In astonishment, the entire group turned to face the figure that had appeared before them. At that moment, everyone understood that it was a giant, mutated goblin not described in the mission. With weapon in hand, Iris announced that she would focus on bringing it down and explained the plan. Thus, she instructed Myrna to hit the goblin's right eye, while Loke and Mile would buy time for her to finish it off. Following the plan, the archer jumped from a rock and readied her bow for the shot. Then she aimed accurately at the target. With that, the arrow struck the creature's eye squarely. Then, seeing the monster react, Loke shouted for Mile to raise the shield immediately. Shortly after, the two advanced together with their weapons enveloped in energy. However, as he jumped to attack, Loke's strike had little effect. In the midst of his advance, he realized that something was wrong, for the giant hand of the goblin was getting closer to grab him. At that moment, Iris prepared a mana explosion spell. Soon after, she shot multiple energy spheres that hit the goblin's body. With the impact, the creature recoiled, screaming. So great was the force of the attack that it hurled another monster at them. Surprised, Loke shouted upon realizing that the creature had just thrown a goblin. At that moment, Myrna yelled for Iris to duck, as the body was flying directly towards her. From the shadows, Asher used a skill to deflect the projectile in midair. As a result, a burst of energy struck the goblin mid-flight, altering its trajectory. Shortly after, the projectile smashed against the stone wall, right next to the mage. Fallen on the ground, she observed the stain on the wall. At the same time, a new arrow was shot at high speed. This time, the shot precisely hit the other eye of the giant goblin. With the impact, the monster finally fell to the ground, defeated. Following that, the group ran to check on Iris, and she replied that she was fine. Even confused, the young woman commented that the goblin's trajectory changed in the air, saving her from a direct impact. Finally, Loke suggested that everyone return to the village to collect the reward, as the mission was complete. Once hidden again, Asher watched the group leave and remarked that it was good nothing worse had occurred. Near the goblin's body, he revealed that he had followed the group invisibly to observe one of the specimens. Thus, he concluded that, although all the other specimens he encountered had a torn smile, that goblin was a different type. Then he understood that, unlike the other variants, that goblin was merely a failed experiment. While watching the group, Iris instructed everyone to check the area for any remaining monsters. With that, Asher realized that the mage was highly sensitive to mana, and it was no coincidence that she had sensed him before. At that moment, he lamented not having been able to gather any useful information from the creature. Suddenly, a voice surprised him. Soon a man emerged from the back of the cave, commenting that someone had appeared during his absence. Immediately, Iris questioned the man's identity and warned him not to come any closer. The newcomer then introduced himself as the caretaker of the place they had just destroyed. He then explained that the creature exposed the location by building a totem, as the brain manipulation did not contain its instincts. Next, he asked the group if they noticed any unusual behavior in the goblin. In light of the silence, he deduced that there was nothing special about the creature and worried about the reaction of the professor. He soon decided that he needed to fix what had been done, which meant that everyone there would have to die. Upon hearing the threat, the adventurers took up combat positions. At that moment, Iris asked if he would fight alone, and the man confirmed that he would do so to ensure they did not reveal the location. As a last attempt, she asked if a promise of silence would be enough to avoid combat. However, he dismissed the proposal, stating that he had no intention of letting them leave. With a sinister smile, he confessed that, in fact, he only wanted to hear them scream. As he advanced towards the group, he asked who would like to die first. Suddenly, an unknown voice declared that the only one to die would be him, making him laugh at the bravado. At that very moment, he realized that the voice had come from behind and tried to find out who had spoken. Soon after, Asher appeared behind him, questioning his threats about screams and death. The man knelt in a defensive posture as the intruder asserted that he was the one trying to pretend to be strong. With his body enveloped in energy and preparing a spell, Asher then asked if the man did not agree. Thus, Asher advanced towards the man, stating that he did not intend to intervene. Even so, his intervention became necessary to prevent the group behind him from being annihilated. With that, he remembered that the man had referred to the goblin as a test subject. Moreover, the mention of a figure called Professor also caught his attention. In light of that certainty, the adversary looked at him seriously and asked who he was. Then Asher refused to answer while preparing a large magic circle. The caretaker stated that it did not matter, even if his identity was not revealed. He then advanced surrounded by an aura, assuring that the fact of Asher dying by his hands would not change. In response, the mage prepared a spell of multiple fire arrows. The caretaker, however, cut each of the arrows with his energy attacks. At that moment, the man's sword strike collided directly with the magic shield. Soon after, the shield broke and released a pulse of mana that hurled the enemy backward. Landing, he realized that the opponent's speed came from his legs reinforced by energy. Meanwhile, Asher also noticed the enemy's superior speed and decided that he would need to change his combat strategy. The caretaker then praised Asher's magical speed and announced that in this case, he would also increase his own speed. With a challenge, he leaped off a wall to attack the mage directly. In response, Asher prepared a double spell, combining the Winter Gale and Ice spells. The ability to use the elements of ice and wind simultaneously surprised the opponent. With that, he shot a blast of ice at his opponent. Even recognizing the skill of the attack, the man dodged each projectile with agility. Soon after, he jumped over Asher, claiming that the attack would be useless if he missed the target. The mage, however, remained still with his head down. Then, the caretaker's energy strike passed inches from his head. At the last second, Asher leaned back and completely dodged the attack. The dodge surprised both the enemy and Iris, who did not understand how a mage reacted at that speed. Right after, he activated an ignition spell, engulfing himself in flames. At that moment, a huge explosion of fire engulfed the area where the caretaker was. After the explosion, rain began to fall over the location. Amid the storm, the enemy realized he had been lured into a counterattack and assured that the trick would not work again. Asher then questioned whether traps would no longer work and declared that from that moment on, he would fight like a true mage. Suddenly, the ground began to shake and rise, causing Iris to scream from the jolt. As the earth pillar continued to rise, the group tried to understand what was happening. Upon seeing that the pillar had stopped, Iris recognized the spell as terrain manipulation and was surprised by its use in combat. Moreover, she noted that due to the quick conjurations and large-scale spells, his mana reserve must be immense. Thus, she concluded that this combat style was something she had never seen before. At that moment, the caretaker mocked Asher for having fled into the air after promising to fight like a mage. Suddenly, he realized that the opponent not only floated but also lifted all the adventurers along with him. He soon noticed that the previous flames had melted the ice fragments, creating a puddle of water at his feet. At the same time, the mage extended his hand towards the water. Not understanding the intention, the caretaker looked up. Meanwhile, Iris watched the scene closely. As the enemy looked up, the mage identified the new attack as lightning magic. At that moment, Asher activated a third-level lightning spell, which few academy professors could use. The energy of the spell was so intense that he needed all his effort to control it. Surprised, the caretaker questioned Asher's identity for his ability to use fire, ice, wind, and even the lightning element. Soon after, Iris realized that the young man was using a triple conjuration to combine the elements at once. The combined attack resulted in an explosion that raised a huge cloud of dust. The smoke slowly began to dissipate. As soon as the dust settled, the mage floated down to the ground and asked the caretaker about a similar orc. Then he questioned him if all the creatures were related to the professor. Fallen and injured, the man understood that Asher was responsible for what happened to the orc. With a smile, he asked if the young man had come from the Ark. At that moment, the mention of the Ark left Asher visibly confused. The caretaker dismissed him from knowing, but the mage demanded the location of the professor, revealing his interest in the experiments. Even recognizing the danger, the man began to reveal the location of the professor. However, in a twist, he decided he would die along with Asher and spat something from his mouth. In the last instant, he activated a magical shield to protect himself. He soon understood the man's response and prepared one last annihilation spell. With regret, he lamented that his efforts to obtain a lead on the jesters were in vain. Still, he decided to focus on what needed to be done and walk towards the group of adventurers. With a dark silhouette and glowing eyes, he rose before them to announce his decision and declared that everyone there would have to follow his orders. Back in the village, Iris informed Asher that she had followed his orders and received extra compensation from the chief. She explained that the payment was 1.2 million ELK in exchange for silence about the mutant goblin. As soon as he confirmed the end of the agreement, Asher handed her a pouch of coins, asking her to accept it. In her surprise, he clarified that this amount was the commission for the mission. He then requested that the group accompany him to the city of Martz. During the journey, Iris took the opportunity to question him about the theory of elemental magic, and soon the group arrived at their destination. Upon entering the city, Asher observed the streets carefully while searching for a bank. While the others headed to the guild to submit their reports, Iris was tasked with guiding him. Since he expressed the desire to claim the reward and open an account, she suggested they go to the town hall first. Confident, she took the lead, claiming to know Martz very well. From a distance, the rest of the group commented on how calm the leader seemed even after the incident in the cave. The first destination was the town hall of Martz, responsible for managing the rewards. At the entrance, a guard tried to stop him for not having verifiable identification. The situation was resolved when he presented the guarantee from Baron Pythe. Inside the building, an official greeted him enthusiastically, declaring he had already heard of his deeds. The gratitude stemmed from the fact that his family lived in the Baron's territory, which had been protected by Asher against bandits. Unexpectedly, the man also granted him a new identification document. Thanks to this, he was able to open his bank account without difficulties. He still had the old account in Vienna, but he knew that using it could attract the attention of the master of the tower. With that in mind, he preferred to exercise caution. Next, he visited a blacksmith, asking for his weapon to be transformed into a staff. The blacksmith estimated 3 days to complete the job and handed him a temporary staff. As they walked, Iris wanted to know why he preferred this type of weapon, and the answer was that he had gotten used to brooms. Shortly after, they arrived at the public library of Martz. Curious, the mage asked if he was looking for enchantment books, but warned that they might not be compatible with his level. He replied that the basics would be sufficient, and she wanted to know how many he intended to take. To her surprise, Asher stated that he wanted them all. In the great reading room, the librarian tried to intervene upon noticing the pile of books gathered. Asher requested that the amount be charged to his account and that the volumes be delivered to his hotel. With the confirmation, the librarian celebrated the largest sale in the history of the place. At the end of the day, Iris rested exhausted on the table while he remained focused on a book. Catching her breath, she asked if he had taken him to all the places he wanted. He confirmed that it was enough for that day, leaving her surprised by the simple answer. Soon after, Iris realized she had never asked his name and decided to question him. Behind the book, he introduced himself as Asher, but said she could call him whatever she wanted. She accepted the suggestion and asked to speak more casually. Seizing the chance, Iris finally wanted to know the reason for his presence in the cave. The question left him thoughtful, without an immediate answer. After reflecting, he decided to give a vague excuse, saying he was pursuing that man. In response, she seemed to understand the situation. Then she remembered the questions asked about the professor inside the cave and began to piece things together. Asher commented that, although he hadn't accomplished much, The day had already been long enough for her to rest. Still, Iris offered to accompany him since he was new to the city, but he declined the offer. On the street, she bid him good night, stating she would see him the next day. As she walked away, she discreetly celebrated the end of a long workday. Soon after, she threw herself onto a bench, murmuring that he was indeed a strange man. Reflecting, she acknowledged his magical mastery, capable of manipulating all elemental attributes with an immeasurable mana reserve. Moreover, he mastered theories superior to those of many professors, and also had a talent for teaching. His face also indicated that he must be quite popular. Even so, when talking to him, his posture was rigid, almost like that of a scarecrow. Suddenly, she held her face in confusion as his image insisted on appearing in her mind. She concluded then that he was the most skilled mage she had ever met, a rare talent. Determined, she decided that the next day she would ask even more questions about elemental magic. At that moment, a distant explosion caught her attention. She turned abruptly in the direction of the sound. She soon realized that the Lorix Hotel was on fire. Immediately, she remembered that this was where Asher was staying. Amid the blaze, a human silhouette floated in the air. Harris looked at the scene, unable to believe what she was seeing. The figure amidst the flames revealed itself as Asher, with his eyes shining intensely. Thus, in a laboratory, a hooded figure informs a bespectacled man that Surgeon is dead. Then the man asks who killed him, and the hooded figure replies that they found traces of offensive magic. Upon hearing the conclusion that someone else had murdered him, the man throws a vial at the hooded figure's face. After that, he warns him not to play dumb. With a serious look, he repeats the question about who killed Surgeon. However, the hooded figure explains that they have not yet confirmed the culprit, and the man laments the loss of Surgeon before asking about the test subject. Soon the subordinate confirms that all traces of Surgeon and the test subject have been completely erased. With that, the professor criticizes him for not also taking care of who killed Surgeon. At that moment, he connected the deaths of the goblin and Surgeon to the silence of the two test subjects from the Baronia Paitha. With the experiment nearly complete, he wondered if the art group had already discovered them. He then orders the hooded figure not to return until they have killed the responsible party. Soon the messenger departs, determined to find the culprit at any cost. Meanwhile, at the hotel, Asher was practicing basic enchantment magic when a voice greeted him. At the same moment, while he continued practicing, the voice warned him to fall asleep quickly, as his last moment would be when he lay down. Suddenly, the hooded man, hidden under the bed, found the silence in the room strange. Upon seeing the Bone of the Earth spell forming, he reacted in surprise at being discovered. With that, Asher attacked him directly with his staff, forcing him to jump back in surprise. Soon after, the enemy floated in the air surrounded by an intense aura of fire. Amidst the crowd, the assassin observed the use of explosive magic in a confined space. Because of this, he concluded that Asher was a third-level mage and decided to retreat for the time being. To cover his escape, he began shouting about a terrorist attack, spreading panic among the people. With that, Asher ordered everyone to flee and report the incident to the guards immediately. Amidst the chaos, he reflected on how the assassin managed to avoid his magical detection. He soon understood that the enemy had made a mistake by rushing too much. By completely erasing his existence, his presence became even more visible to Asher. Thus, he became like a dark hole on a blank page. An attack then hit him squarely. While fleeing, the assassin questioned how he had been sensed and what the Ark had sent, shocked by his opponent's lack of hesitation. Unfazed, Asher prepared a magic arrow spell. Soon after, the enemy dodged the projectiles while running through an alley. The assassin jumped back amidst the debris, trying to shield himself from the magical attack. From above, Asher observed and wondered if he had entered the building to avoid his attack. He soon landed in front of the building to continue the chase. Upon entering, he realized that the enemy had chosen a building occupied by a group of vagrants. At that moment, one of the men confronted him about the commotion, but Asher only asked where the assassin had gone. The man merely stared at him with an ironic smile, commenting on his impatience. He then made it clear that any information would come at a price. With a sigh, Asher realized there were no obvious escape routes in the area. The moment he concluded that the assassin was still nearby, a dagger whizzed past his face. The enemy used the man as a shield, stabbing him in an attempt to hit Asher. Hidden behind the body, the assassin watched closely for Asher's reaction. He then glared at his opponent, recognizing the cowardice of that move. Without hesitation, he unleashed a shockwave that slammed the enemy against the back wall. Dazed by the impact, the assassin quickly devised a plan. Lure him into expending energy on a magical barrier, and in that interval, escape using a smoke bomb. With the plan in mind, he leaped armed for the final attack. As he waited for Asher to raise the barrier, he was surprised to see that the mage remained still. Suddenly, he recognized the Bone of the Earth spell forming. To his surprise, the mana was concentrated at the tip of the staff, not in a defense. At that moment, he understood that the opponent also mastered hand-to-hand combat. The impact hit him squarely, forcing him to retreat. Then the spell suspended him in the air, immobilizing him. Desperate, the assassin resorted to his last resource, a smoke bomb. The explosion covered the entire area with a dense fog. To dissipate the black veil, Asher conjured a whirlwind. The smoke quickly dispersed, revealing a trail of blood on the ground. Suspicious, he wondered if the enemy had truly escaped. Suddenly, a firm voice interrupted him, ordering him not to move. Surrounded by guards, he was informed that he was under arrest for arson and acts of terrorism. Although the city of Mards slept, the report on the incident was carefully summarized. Then Mayor Henry Dacre questioned whether Asher was indeed responsible for the terrorist act. Soon, an officer clarified that he appeared to be the victim of an assassination attempt that led to the confrontation. With that, the guildmaster, Oscar, explained that the case seemed to be linked to another incident, and that was why he was overseeing the investigation. Thus, the mayor expressed concern for the newcomer and asked about the damages caused. In response, the officer informed that only the top floor of the inn was destroyed and a wanted criminal died, but the murderer remained at large. Additionally, he mentioned the testimony of an adventurer who encountered a mutant goblin and an armed attacker in a cave. However, Oscar revealed that when they visited the site, they found no trace of bodies or goblins. Thus, the space was completely empty, with no signs of monsters or creatures. Therefore, the mayor concluded that an organized group was targeting adventurers and worried about the possibility of more incidents. Next, the master confirmed the suspicion and explained that he tried to assign a bodyguard for the young man, but encountered a problem. He revealed that a rumor spread throughout the town, causing adventurers and soldiers to refuse to protect him. Faced with the situation, the mayor decided he would speak with his own knights about the matter. The next day, at the town hall reception, Asher was waiting with his new staff, which had been completed quickly. Then, just as he thought about starting the pursuit, a voice announced his entrance into the room. Soon, a knight introduced himself as Jason, the vice captain of the Knights of Marts, and informed that he would act as his bodyguard. He then asked if there were any questions, while the young mage observed him in silence. At that moment, the young man understood that the suspicions about him had been lifted, but he noticed the knight's youth. Therefore, he questioned whether he could leave, but Jason imposed the condition that he accompany him at all times. Still, he lamented the situation but agreed to leave, leaving the guard confused about the destination. After walking for half a day, the sun began to set. Exhausted, Jason finally asked where exactly they were going. Then the mage remembered the condition, and while the knight complained about the hours of walking, he announced that they had arrived. Thus, in front of a large building, he revealed that this was the place he intended to visit. Not understanding, Jason questioned why they had walked all day to get there. However, without answering, the young man unleashed a massive explosion of fire against the building. While the knight watched in shock at the explosion, he explained that he was there to find someone. With a serious look, he revealed that he was searching for the assassin who had tried to kill him the day before. In response to Jason's question, he confirmed that the enemy was indeed at that location. Finally, he explained that he had managed to briefly touch the assassin's body to cast a tracking spell. With that, he explained that the tracking spell Trace linked the target's mana flow directly to his own. Since the Trace spell had not been dissipated, it meant that the assassin had not yet noticed him. As Jason commented on the power of magic, he suddenly noticed something unusual on the ground. Thus, the explosion revealed the entrance to a hidden underground passage. With his magic, the young mage confirmed that the target's trail led directly into the passage. Then he asked him if he knew that tunnel, and the knight denied, explaining that the entrance to that area was not there. Thus, Jason understood the gravity of the situation, as an unmapped tunnel leading out of the city was a significant problem. This represented a huge and dangerous security flaw in Martes. With his sword in hand, the vice captain declared that they needed to seal that location immediately. However, the mage interrupted him, stating that the priority was to pursue the assassin before anything else. Even so, Jason suggested calling for reinforcements, but he refused the idea, explaining that they would lose the target if they did. Then he jumped into the passage, asserting that immediate pursuit was the only right decision to make. Then the knight observed the dark passage, displeased with his companion's attitude. With a shout, he ended up jumping into the tunnel, complaining about how all mages were annoying. Shortly after, the assassin began to walk down the long, dark underground corridor. In his thoughts, he lamented having wasted so much time at the location. After escaping, he needed to heal his wounds, but the delay made him fear that the professor would try to kill him. Still, he dismissed the idea of fleeing, as he knew he wouldn't be able to escape the clutches of gluttony. With no other option, he entered a room, hoping that the professor would show some mercy. Then the figure greeted him sarcastically, mentioning his famous face in Martes. With that, the man reprimanded him for creating a spectacle that alerted the mayor and the guild about their presence. He then demanded a clear and concise explanation of what had happened. Thus, the assassin reported that after preparing an ambush, he was detected and attacked by a large-scale spell. Afterward, he explained that even after using a smoke bomb to escape, the mage pursued him the entire time. He then suggested that his escape was only possible because of the arrival of the knights, but the professor doubted that excuse. Suddenly, the leader seemed to understand what had really happened. Urgently, he ordered the assassin to remove his armor and burn it immediately. As soon as the armor was thrown into the fire, a magical tracking circle revealed itself on it. Thus, the criminal understood that a spell had been cast on him during the fight. With a panicked face, the professor shouted that they had been found. With no time to lose, he ordered to destroy all traces while taking the specimen, and the assassin agreed. At that very moment, a huge explosion of fire erupted at the entrance of the tunnel. Amid the flames, the fugitive commented that the trace reaction had disappeared, finally realizing what had happened. Soon after, the wizard and the knight entered the room, and the enemy remarked that it was a pity for them. With the staff in hand next to Jason, the young man then declared that it was already too late. With the repetition that it was already too late, the two groups faced each other in a tense standoff inside the room. Thus, with a keen gaze, the young wizard began to analyze his opponents to understand the situation. By their combat stance, he quickly recognized the assassin and concluded that the man behind him was the professor. At that moment, the dark figure was associated with various monstrous creatures and cruel experiments. Then the professor questioned him if he was the mad wizard, commenting that the Ark had sent someone strange. In light of the new mention of the Ark group, the young man decided that he would subjugate them first to extract information later. Next, he cast a earth spear, but the assassin moved to protect his master. However, the professor reprimanded him for messing everything up, and the subordinate merely apologized. With no other choice, the man ordered his follower to take responsibility and buy time while he escaped. However, the wizard assured him that he would not go anywhere and shot a magic arrow to stop him. With a swift movement, the assassin jumped in front and blocked the spell. With the weapon in hand, he declared that he had orders to buy time. Faced with the block, the wizard realized that a low-power spell would not work, but a stronger one could eliminate the chance of obtaining information. In that moment of hesitation, Jason advanced and blocked the enemy's attack with his sword. With the opponent occupied, the knight shouted for him to go ahead, assuring that he would follow shortly after. In response, the wizard quickly advanced enveloped in energy, to Jason's surprise. Soon after, he sped through the tunnel, leaving only a magical trace behind. Upon reaching the end of the passage, he stopped to look for any sign of the professor. Suddenly, a strong smell in the air caught his attention. Thus, he recognized the odor of bodies and spotted the figure waiting for him at the end of a long walkway. Then the professor greeted him, expressing surprise at how quickly he had arrived, but happy to show his work. With a gesture, he revealed dozens of creatures trapped in dark cells behind him, asking what he thought of his creations. The young man then identified the creatures as jesters and confirmed that the man was the creator of all of them. Next, the professor explained that these were the failures that had not fully accepted his ideals. Shortly after, he picked up a remote control, assuring that they would be more than enough to deter an intruder. With that, he pressed the button and released all the creatures to attack the wizard at once. As the monsters surrounded him, he prepared for an area attack to avoid wasting time. Then he focused to prepare the double casting of the wave and thunder spells. With the combination, he unleashed a massive wave of thunder that swept through the hall and hit all the creatures. Thus, the professor was caught off guard by the powerful wave of energy. Finally, the impact of the devastating spell violently threw him backward. Fallen on the ground and still feeling the effects of the magic, the professor called him a lunatic. Then he understood that the information about being just a third-level wizard was completely wrong. With that, he concluded that to control magic at that level, Asher had to be at least a fourth-level wizard. Still on the ground, the man lamented that his decades of research would be wasted if everything ended there. In a desperate act, he dragged himself to a large red button and pressed it hard. Thus, the action activated a containment capsule that rose from the ground, revealing a humanoid figure inside it. Soon after, he declared that it was time to awaken his masterpiece, as the creature inside the capsule began to move. Suddenly, the young wizard appeared behind him and questioned where he had fled to. However, the professor asked how he had passed through the creatures, but received the answer that it was obvious. With a serious look, the young man simply stated that he had burned everything. Faced with that response, the man understood that a single mage could not have done that and confirmed his suspicion. Thus, with the reflection of the opponent in his glasses, he confidently declared that this was a fourth-level mage. Shortly after, he pointed to the creature in the capsule and asked what the young man saw beside him. With a smile, he described it as his masterpiece and his own daughter. As he pressed the button, he revealed that this creature was Gluttony, the embodiment of his group's ideology. With that, he declared with conviction that this child represented the future of humanity. Without hesitation, the mage advanced to attack him before he could finish his sentence. However, he realized he had arrived a second too late, as the button had already been pressed. Thus, from the capsule, the creature emerged completely transformed, representing the ideal future of consumption and evolution. Seeing it support itself on the ground, the young man finally understood what the professor was trying to do. Still on the ground, the man celebrated that the Mad Mage's mana would now serve as nourishment for his creation. With a sinister smile, the creature stared at him with its bright, hungry eyes. Then, with a mouthful of teeth, it turned to him and declared that it was hungry. This declaration surprised the mage, who did not expect the being to be able to speak. Before he could react, the creature shouted again that it was hungry, releasing an aura of energy. Then it fixed its gaze on him and stated that he looked delicious, declaring that it would eat him. Soon he noticed that the enemy had enhanced its body with energy, demonstrating a skill that would take years to acquire. With that, he watched the artificial creation use its abilities to leap towards him. Then it attacked him with a series of quick strikes, targeting his blind spots and forcing him to defend himself. As he defended himself, the mage recognized that, as a researcher, the creature was interesting, but the fight needed to end. Thus, with a shout, the monster charged and struck his energy shield with all its might. Immediately afterward, the young man responded with a staff strike that hit the creature squarely in the face. With the force of the impact, it was violently thrown back, shattering the ground upon falling. Finally, before the fallen enemy, the mage declared firmly that she was no match for him. To survive for 7 years as a test subject in the Bullrun Magic Tower, the young man had to constantly suppress his explosive anger. Thus, back in his room after the experiments, he used those emotions as a driving force to complete his theory. With that, the creature was on the ground. The more his emotions were stirred by the battle, the more focused his expression became. Soon, his mind became clear, and a cold rationality took control of his actions. Then he nicknamed the professor's masterpiece Mortal, whose physical abilities were comparable to those of the Jester of Pithe. Moreover, its regenerative capacity also proved to be equally impressive. However, the creature demonstrated an abnormally superior elasticity, flexibility, and speed. Despite this, the mage realized that the enemy's advantages ended there. When he tried to attack, the creature jumped up quickly. Suddenly, an earth spear emerged from the ground and struck it directly. Then, the young man revealed that the previous attack had only been a feint. Next, he prepared multiple magic arrows for the next attack. The creature, however, lacked the technique to distinguish tricks and only attacked with brute force. With that, a bone spike pierced its shoulder, revealing it as a beast in human form. With its body impaled by spikes, the mage declared that it was too weak to be called a masterpiece. Shocked by the defeat, the professor could not believe that his creation had fallen in such a way. Soon, he remembered his notes, which described how the creature absorbed the characteristics of its prey. Thus, it would become a being in constant strengthening that would transform it into the true neo-human, the ideal evolution of humanity. Even so, that ideal being had been defeated in a completely one-sided manner. Then the man understood that the creature was still weak and considered feeding it his own arm to restore its strength. With a new plan in mind, he decided that he would kill the mage to escape the place. Suddenly, the young man pointed his staff at him and demanded to know where the experiment records were. Then he threatened him, saying he would kill his child right there if the records were not delivered. The professor, with no choice, agreed to the demand, thinking that this was an opportunity to survive. With that, he offered the research diary, claiming that it would prove the value of his work. Then, the young man took the diary and began to flip through it quickly. Soon afterward, he threw it on the ground along with other notes, stating that he would not need that. Not understanding, the man questioned him about what he thought he was doing. The mage, however, recognized the value of the research, but he did not understand why it would be discarded. With a serious look, the young man simply explained that it did not align with his own ideals. As the professor begged for his life, the mage observed the notes on the terrorist plan. He then considered questioning him about Ark and gluttony, but quickly changed his mind. As soon as he heard Jason approaching, the mage decided he needed to end everything to avoid complications. With that, he declared it was time to disappear, while the professor pleaded for one more chance. Without hesitation, he activated the spell Ignite, and the man was completely consumed by flames. Soon after, the knight arrived at the scene and asked if Sir Asher was alright. In front of the campfire, he confirmed that he was safe and questioned him about the assassin. Jason then boasted about having landed a solid blow, assuring that the enemy must be in much worse condition. While reading a document, the mage understood from the evasive response that the target had escaped. At that moment, he realized that the document in his hands was, in fact, a map. As the knight asked about what was burning, he noticed that the terrain on the map was near Martz. His attention then turned to a red mark indicating a specific location on the map. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his head and bent over from the impact. With the sudden pain, he recognized the symptoms of mana exhaustion and decided to return for now. A few days after the subjugation of the professor, peace seemed to have returned to Martz with the exposure of the plan. Upon confirming the scientist's plans, the mayor became furious and put the Knights of Martz on high alert. With that, the warriors reinforced their defenses and announced that they would seal the passage, but that was no longer his concern. His new concern now was the injection of mana expansion stimulants. Thanks to the injections to his physical limit, he managed to shorten years of a mage's growth in just a few weeks. After the procedure, he took a deep breath to recover. With that, he declared it was time to move on to the next stage, having reached rank 3 in the elemental magic system. In a dark hall, a figure sitting on a throne questioned whether the professor was dead. Holding a wine glass, the man commented that it was one less annoying thing to worry about. Upon discovering that the mage had been responsible, he decided that he would need to meet him in person. In the training field of the Knights of Marts, the sun shone brightly. Meanwhile, the young mage was training hard with his new staff, honing his combat skills. Soon after, he remembered the location marked on the map, which turned out to be an old research facility. Hidden under a tree in the forest, the entrance could only be accessed with a mechanical device. Inside the facility, they found no significant forms of life other than rats and insects. However, they ended up locating a fang-shaped emblem and the hide of a mabat, known for its high resistance. Despite the search, no information about the Ark or Gluttony group was found at the site. Still, the sorcerer felt satisfied to have obtained the valuable mabat hide and avoided a catastrophe in Martis. Suddenly, a knight approached and informed him that the mayor was looking for him. At the town hall, the city leader thanked him, acknowledging the enormous debt he had to him. He then explained that, thanks to the discovery of the plan, they managed to capture the remnants of the faction hidden in the city. Soon after, he asked for his understanding in keeping his contribution a secret, and the mage agreed to avoid panic. Thus, he reflected on the importance of building his reputation to gain money and experience. Being recognized as the hero who saved the city, he hoped to obtain more opportunities, like the one he had in Paith's territory. With the conversation concluded, the mayor invited him to accompany him, revealing the true reason for keeping the incident a secret. Then, the man guided him to a vault that stored rare items purchased by the city or confiscated from criminals. Upon entering, the place was revealed to be the magical items vault, and the young man observed everything with curiosity. As a reward, the mayor offered him any item of his choice, explaining that this was the true compensation for his efforts. The first option was a skillfully forged mithril sword, designed to be easily imbued with mana. In addition, the vault was filled with high-quality weapons and magical artifacts, and the mayor encouraged him to choose carefully. Thus, he understood that, although there were many chances to build fame, opportunities like that were rare. With that, he asked for permission to evaluate the equipment, and the mayor agreed, impressed by his skill. The first item evaluated was a sprout staff, which offered only minor bonuses. Next, a magical cloak also proved inferior to what he already possessed. Additionally, a recovery ring proved useful, but not enough to justify an equipment swap. While considering his options, a subtle glimmer in a display caught his attention. As he approached, he picked up an unknown ring with a green gem in the center. However, the item did not react to his assessment, indicating that it was likely not a magical item. The mayor then reassured him, telling him not to rush and to find what he needed. With that, the wizard agreed to take as much time as necessary as the day turned into night. Thus, with the delay, the mayor urged him to make a decision, noting that he was quite meticulous. Finally, the young man decided and chose a protection necklace that had an automatic mana barrier. Soon after, the mayor inquired about the mana consumption of the item, but he assured that it would not be a problem. Still, the local authority decided that just one item was not a sufficient reward. With that, he also decided to offer the ring that caught the young man's attention earlier. To his surprise, the mayor declared him the hero of Marts and insisted that he accept the extra gift. When questioned, the wizard revealed that he planned to stay in Marts for a while longer to resolve something he needed to. With the mayor's offer of help, the scene then shifted to a dark mine in the Viron territory. Inside, a miner was breaking rocks with his pickaxe until he found something unusual on the ground. Soon he unearthed a human skull and screamed upon seeing it. Then, another miner questioned him about the scare, but he explained that a normal pickaxe strike should have broken that. Not caring, the companion simply kicked the skull aside to resolve the issue. He then ordered the other to grab his tool and get back to work so they could go home. Suddenly, the first miner pointed behind him, trying to alert him to an imminent danger. While asserting that there was nothing, a floating skull with an aura appeared right behind his back. Soon the skull transformed into an undead skeleton wrapped in that energy. With that, the miner shouted for everyone to evacuate the mine as the skeletons began to attack the others. In the midst of the chaos, the workers were quickly overwhelmed and taken down by the creatures. Shortly after, a rumor began to spread about the undead that had emerged in the Viron mine. Thus, with the emergence of creatures that could not be killed, a state of emergency was declared in Viron. As a result, the reports from the survivors spread, and the entire territory began to panic. Meanwhile, the tragic story of Viron began to circulate from mouth to mouth. Soon a messenger also arrived in Marts to report the incident. Over time, the news eventually reached the group of adventurers from Verdun. During this period, the wizard began to teach Iris about enchantment magic. Finally, the learning process took a whole month to be completed. Thus, a month passed since the subjugation of the professor, amidst a peaceful landscape. During this time, the young man learned enchantment magic with Iris while training with an orc. With a warrior enchantment, he jumped into the air and attacked the enemy with his spear. Right after, he advanced quickly, enhancing his strength, speed, and senses with magic. As he dodged a blow, he demonstrated his mastery of the new skills in real combat. For her part, Iris watched in shock, commenting that a wizard had defeated an orc with bare hands in just 13 seconds. While catching his breath, she continued to observe him in silence. After that, the young man thanked her for the lessons, and the mage replied that he was amazing and would have learned on his own. The warrior explained that he wouldn't have managed without her help, as all his books had been burned. As they walked, the young woman analyzed him attentively. Suddenly, the young man denied having any kind of problem, and she reacted in surprise, trying to explain herself. Then he advised her to keep thoughts like that to herself as he walked away. Back in the city, the mage insisted that it was all just a big misunderstanding. At that moment, a voice greeted him, calling him Mr. Asher. Soon the guild master of Martz, Oscar, revealed himself and announced that he had a request to make. The young man quickly remembered that Oscar, the guild master of Martz, was responsible for the investigation when he was falsely accused. With that, he understood that the reason for the request was the emergence of hordes of undead in the Viron mines. Because of rumors about curses and diseases, no adventurer was volunteering for the mission. Thus, Oscar sought him out upon learning that he had thwarted a planned terrorist attack. Normally, he would have refused, but he accepted the mission because he had spent his money and wanted to gain more fame. While they were preparing, some adventurers commented on how he was an unusual mage, training in hand-to-hand combat. At that moment, Iris approached and asked about the rumors, but he pretended not to know anything. The young man then asked her if she wasn't afraid of the undead, since her group was also going. She confidently replied that, as a graduate of the academy, those silly rumors did not affect her. She then explained that it would be a good opportunity, as they would provide support from the rear and not from the front lines. With a serious look, he simply expressed the wish that this would indeed be a good opportunity, as she said. The next day, the expedition set out, with the caravan traveling through the forest. Inside the carriage, other mages noticed that he was continuously using the flight spell and keeping his distance from the group. One of the female mages then turned to Iris and asked what her relationship was with the young man, as they seemed close. With an embarrassed expression, the young woman simply replied that they could be considered upperclassmen and freshmen. The mage then explained that during a dangerous mission, her group was saved by him, and they grew closer after that. Flying at a distance, the young man seemed to notice something on the horizon. The other mage asked if they were from the same academy, but Iris awkwardly replied that he was more like a teacher. Suddenly, the young man appeared at the carriage door and announced that a horde of undead was chasing the residents of Viron. Without hesitation, he declared that he would go ahead to provide support and took off at high speed. Upon spotting the horde of skeletons, he considered it the perfect opportunity for a test. With that, he grabbed a grimoire, ready to see the results of the past month studying enchantment magic. The book was a rare grimoire he had stolen from the magic tower, capable of enhancing its user's magical power. It was a tome of unregistered elemental magic, in which he had inscribed a magic circle of connection. To test the connection, the young man then prepared a geographical manipulation spell. With the spell, he released a massive wave of energy across the battlefield to test its power. Inside the carriage, the other mages were startled by the tremor as the horde of undead was lifted from the ground. The young man then clenched his fist, controlling the power of the spell. In the next instant, giant stone hands completely crushed the horde of skeletons. To finish, he prepared a double conjuration with the fire element and launched a powerful fire attack. With the final attack, he unleashed an explosion that covered the entire field. The intense fire then completely incinerated all the remaining skeletons on site. The group of mages watched in shock, questioning how he still had mana for spells of that level. Soon after, the young man landed on the ground amidst the destruction. He then understood that the combination of his altered body with the power of the grimoire resulted in the massive spell. Seeing the rift he created, he concluded that all the time invested had not been in vain. Meanwhile, Iris watched him from afar, realizing that his skill level was already far beyond that of a 4th level mage. Suddenly, a skeletal hand emerged from behind and grabbed the mage's shoulder. A larger skeleton then pinned her from behind, causing her to scream from the surprise attack. At that same moment, a muscular man appeared and cut down the enemy with a single swing of his cleaver. Thus, Iris and Locke observed the newcomer in silence, not understanding what had happened. The stranger then held up a necklace with the number 2 and questioned the situation. At the same time, another man was searching for his prey, a platinum-armored user with an axe. The brute then turned to the group and asked why everyone was so quiet. With that, he repeated his question about his prey, being identified as the butcher Galliarch. The mage then informed him that, if he was referring to the undead, they were all already dead. The hunter reacted with disbelief, questioning how dozens of creatures could have been eliminated that way. He then recalled the report about the horde and found it strange that all had been exterminated without any injuries. His gaze then turned to the young man, while questioning if he had done all that alone. With that, Galliarch approached and directly asked if that work was his doing. The young man met his gaze with shining eyes and responded with a challenge about what would happen if it were. The brute then explained that he had been hired to hunt those undead, and that he had stolen his prey. In a tense confrontation, the man accused him of interfering in his work. With both enveloped in their auras, Galliarch declared that he would have to pay for that. Floating in the air, the young man questioned what the equivalent price would be, expressing his curiosity. With that, Galliarch noticed that he had increased the distance to choose a mage combat position. Even without understanding, the young man stared at him seriously, considering the possibility of confrontation. The brute then opened a smile with his eyes shining, declaring that it would be fun. One of the men warned Iris that he was being reckless by trying to fight the butcher. Thus, he explained that Galliarch was extremely powerful and dangerous, having crippled a knight during a fit of rage. Surprised, the mage questioned why the guild did not punish him for such a serious crime. The man then confirmed that there was no punishment because the guild needed the brute's strength. Soon, the mage goat explained that the rules did not apply to a platinum rank like him, and the guild knew that. Then, the ranger Nerian asked Goad to stop with the explanations and help him prevent the situation from worsening. The mage then approached and asked Galliarch to calm down, explaining that the other group was just fulfilling a mission. The butcher, however, suggested that they could just kill them and blame the undead, wanting to show the difference in skills. Thus, Goad addressed the young man, commenting that he seemed confident in his abilities. With an aura of energy, he declared that he would show him his place, pinning him with magical pressure. Even under the magical pressure, the young man identified it as being, at most, that of a third-level mage. Under that weight, he understood that the technique was merely a release of raw mana that affected everyone present. With shining eyes, he prepared to react to the force imposed on him. In the next moment, he easily broke the magical pressure and knocked out Goad with a single movement. The brute then watched the scene in surprise, recognizing that the mage was not weak. With that, he concluded that the young man was stronger than he thought and questioned him about his name. With his eyes still shining, he simply replied that his name was Asher. With a smile, Galliarch said goodbye, stating that he would see him in Viron. The confrontation with the butcher's group ended faster than expected. With the mission to protect the survivors, Martz's team ended up delayed in reaching the Viron territory. After the conflict with the platinum rank adventurer, the young man understood that he had entered the bad side of his group. The next day, the Lord of Viron, Farned van Viron, thanked everyone for responding to his summons. He then announced that the Viron troops would depart immediately towards the mines. The mission's objective, with the support of the Order of Moons, was to exterminate the army of undead that had emerged. With Galliarch's group also present, he concluded the speech wishing that no lives would be lost. With Martz's dispatch team ready, he then gave the order for everyone to depart. As they prepared for battle, the butcher approached and asked the young man if he was nervous. A companion then advised him not to fight, but he replied that he would only react if provoked and told them to focus on the battle. With a signal, the horde of undead advanced against the troops, and the battle began with a great explosion. Then, a commander ordered everyone to aim for the enemy's heads to ensure destruction. He also warned that the bodies would regenerate if hit elsewhere, while asking for support from a distance. Suddenly, a blood golem emerged from the mass, and a cleric ordered everyone to retreat to avoid being crushed. The priest reinforced the warning, explaining that common swords would not work against that creature. Without hesitation, the brute jumped over the troops and advanced alone against the colossus. He faced the monster, identifying it as a blood golem. Declaring that it was perfect for a warm-up, he launched himself to attack with his fists. His strike then hit the creature with a flaming and powerful impact. The golem's body, however, absorbed the attack without suffering any apparent damage. Then the butcher ripped the head off the bloody creature. A nearby lord commented on the man's impressive strength but questioned what he was trying to do. With a confident smile, the brute held the blood golem with one hand. Soon after, he threw it away, to everyone's surprise. The piece of the monster then flew and smashed to the ground, right next to the young mage. With a disapproving look, he merely commented on the rudeness of the act. The butcher then provoked him, questioning whether the power he had shown the day before was just for show. As the golem began to move beneath his feet, the brute seemed to notice something. Without warning, the young man activated a terrain manipulation spell that made the ground tremble. Soon after, he conjured a fireball for the next attack. With that, a huge explosion of flames struck the battlefield. Iris then shouted in surprise, not understanding why he had cast two large-scale spells in succession. Amidst the fire, the brute laughed and commented that Despite his appearance, the young man had a strong temperament. He then declared with a smile that he liked that kind of attitude. The butcher then challenged him to see who was stronger, but the young man merely lamented that he hadn't been caught in the explosion. With that, he proposed a competition to see who could defeat more undead and jumped into the midst of the horde. As a result, the subjugation force managed to reach the Viren mines with fewer casualties than expected. Due to the limited space, only a selected group of warriors was chosen to enter the mine. Inside, the brute praised him for the fight, but the young man simply asked him not to act friendly. From a distance, the wizard goat observed the scene, not understanding the butcher's interest in the young man. He then remembered when he was easily knocked out by the conjurer's mana pressure. At that moment, Goat recalled successfully using his own mana pressure. Even so, the bright eyes and serious expression of that wizard came to mind. In an instant, he had been completely suppressed by the other's mana with impressive ease. With that, he concluded that, although they were at the same level, the young man was definitely hiding something. At the entrance to a deeper tunnel, one of the leaders announced that the Viren garrison would wait outside. The selected group then gathered at the entrance, receiving good luck wishes for the mission. Right at the forefront, the young man watched the ranger Nerian from Galliarch's group take the lead. With precise skill, she detected and dispatched an undead with a surprise attack, proving her worth. Seeing everyone performing their roles efficiently, he understood the true advantage of teamwork. Even with the group's coordinated advance, the young man continued to watch the path ahead attentively. He soon noticed a dark aura coming from the depths of the tunnel, piquing his interest. Upon reaching what seemed to be the end of the mine, one of the knights ordered everyone to stop. As he prepared to scan the mine, a cleric urged the others not to fear and to trust in the blessings. Noticing the hesitation, Iris approached and asked the young man if something was wrong. The brute then appeared behind him and asked if he had also sensed the smell of death. He then explained that, although he couldn't locate it, he felt a powerful undead nearby. The young man then confirmed that the butcher's intuition seemed correct and instructed the mage to stay behind him when the battle began. With the confirmation, Iris questioned what was to come, but he simply replied that he didn't know yet. Suddenly, a light appeared at the end of another passage, and some soldiers warned not to advance recklessly. The conjurer then approached and questioned Rox about the reason for the commotion. The knight explained that while checking other tunnels, they had found a light coming from the end of the passage. The brightness at the end of the corridor shone more intensely. The discovery surprised him, as he knew there shouldn't be any other exits besides the one they had entered. The light then revealed itself as daylight, coming from an unexpected opening in the mine's ceiling. Upon reaching the end of the tunnel, the soldiers were astonished by the new area they found. Soon, the group of adventurers advanced to investigate the newly discovered cave. In the center of the cave, a skeleton sitting atop a pile of bones indicated that the place was a tomb. Therefore, one of the soldiers recognized the emblem on the skeleton's chest as the royal crest of Estria. At that moment, Asher remembered that his identity was being concealed and that this land was the Duchy of Rudiante. Since the Duchy of Rudiante had declared independence from the Kingdom of Estria, it was strange to find traces of the old kingdom there. Shortly thereafter, the wizard Goad questioned the presence of such signs, unless the place was not really what everyone thought. With the discovery, he felt determined not to face another embarrassment, as his specialty was gathering information. On the other hand, the butcher Galliarch simplified the situation, stating that it was enough to eliminate the creature to solve the problem. In light of this, Goad himself offered to deal with the undead, surprising the warrior with his initiative. He then explained that there was no need to trouble the brute and that he would handle it alone. With a firm command, the sorcerer ordered the clerics to begin the purification ritual. At that moment, Asher understood that since the creature was a death knight, they could weaken it with purification. As the holy light enveloped the skeleton, it remained still and silent. Suddenly, a rain of stones fell from the ceiling, interrupting the ritual and surprising everyone. Shortly after, the creature's eyes ignited with an intense red glow, indicating that it had awakened. With attention, Asher noticed that the situation was about to change. In the blink of an eye, the skeleton advanced with surprising speed, raising a cloud of dust. Its skeletal hand then quickly approached to attack Goad, who was still lying on the ground. The mage looked back, surprised by the impending attack. At the last second, the brute grabbed Goad and threw him away, intercepting the blow. The skeletal knight then moved again, and the butcher concluded that this was not an ordinary undead. Thus, one of the clerics identified the creature not as a death knight, but as a lamenting knight. The cleric explained that, although it was weaker, the true threat of the creature was different. He then revealed that the lamenting knight possessed the dangerous ability to command other undead. Ready for battle, the warrior stated that the course of action was now clear. With his staff glowing, Asher declared that the group needed to focus on taking down the lamenting knight. Before that, he announced that he would reshape the terrain to neutralize the enemy's numerical advantage. Not understanding, Iris watched him as the ground began to tremble beneath their feet. As the tremor intensified, the young woman screamed and questioned what he was doing. The brute then taunted him, asking if he was trying to claim the enemy all for himself. In response, Asher urged them to think rationally, as there would be many enemies for each of them down there. With the assurance that there would be more than enough to fight, the butcher prepared for combat. Meanwhile, the rest of the group faced the dark mages, and the strategist announced that he would take care of the main target. At the same time, the brute and the clerics positioned themselves to confront the giant skeletons that had appeared. Alone in another part of the battlefield, Asher slowly approached his opponent. Finally, he found himself face to face with the Lamenting Knight. The Lamenting Knight then raised his sword, ready for combat. Soon after, the creature charged at high speed while the mage prepared for the attack. With that, he conjured multiple fire arrows that flew toward the skeletal knight. The fire attack was a strategic choice, as undead are weak against that element. Even engulfed in flames, the enemy remained standing, so the conjurer decided to intensify his next attack. Additionally, he used a double conjuration to prepare a new, more powerful spell. Then, a barrage of heatwave arrows was fired at the adversary. The creature, however, blocked the attack with one hand, surprising everyone. Seizing the opportunity, the young man prepared a fire lance for a direct attack. The spell then struck the knight's chest with a piercing impact. The attack left a hole in its body, but the skeleton showed no signs of damage. In the next moment, the opponent counterattacked by throwing his sword. With the counterattack, the sorcerer understood that a poorly executed block could break his mana barrier. The creature's downward strike left him completely open for the next attack. As a last resort, he prepared a combination of the Wave and Wintergale spells. Thus, with a double conjuration, he unleashed a powerful glacier breath that froze the knight. Soon after, he decided that if fire didn't work, he would crush it with brute force. Focusing his mana, he prepared a triple throw of Earth Lance for the next attack. The attack then struck the adversary's head directly. Suddenly, the creature began to release an aura of energy while murmuring that it needed to return. The mage then watched in surprise as the knight dodged his attack. In the next moment, he noticed that the creature's appearance had completely changed. Suddenly, he felt his mana deplete. Realizing that this was the worst possible moment for that to happen, as the enemy moved away, he understood that he would be defeated if the fight continued this way. At the last second, the warrior emerged and delivered a powerful punch to the creature. With his body covered in blood, the fighter declared that he would not let anyone steal his main course. Elsewhere, the head of a lich fell to the ground, defeated. Soon after, one of the soldiers crushed the skull with his foot. A commander then observed the group and commented that survival against 3 liches was only possible thanks to Nirien. Gode then complained to the commander for giving all the credit to Nirien, and he apologized, acknowledging his contribution. With the battle over, Iris looked up, wondering if everyone else was okay. Myrna then warned her not to worry about the others and to focus on how to escape from there. Looking at the hole in the ceiling, the group realized that there was no way out and that they would be lost if the conjurer was defeated. Suddenly, the ground began to shake violently, catching everyone by surprise. The terrain then started to disintegrate and give way beneath their feet. On the surface, the warrior charged at the Lamenting Knight, initiating the confrontation. With his fist enveloped in energy, he prepared to deliver a powerful blow. He then unleashed a flurry of rapid punches that struck the creature's body squarely. The knight, however, resisted the attack and grabbed the fighter's face with one hand. Soon after, the creature managed to retrieve its sword that had fallen to the ground. Meanwhile, above them, a bright light was approaching. In the next moment, the flash hit the creature squarely. With an axe in hand, the brute landed a kick that sent him flying away. From the bottom of the pit, the group watched the battle and recognized the 2 companions fighting together on the surface. The big guy questioned the mage about still being able to move with a provoking smile. With that, the conjurer asked him to focus, and the other commented that the creature was annoyingly resilient but fun. The strategist then instructed him to act as bait to align their attack, and the partner agreed to do his best. Following the plan, the warrior jumped high into the air, positioning himself directly above the knight. He then descended with a destruction strike that created a massive crater upon impact. With a powerful kick, he shattered the enemy's head into pieces. In the next instant, the creature's body completely regenerated from the fragments. Shortly after, the skeleton summoned several minions from the ground that grabbed the fighter to restrain him. To help him, the mage unleashed a burst of mana that disintegrated all the skeletons around. The big guy then seized the opportunity and grabbed the knight's face with one hand. With a swift motion, he hurled him forcefully against the cave floor. Suddenly, a voice ordered him to get out of the way, surprising him. The conjurer then unleashed a massive explosion of fire that engulfed the area, causing his partner to curse him. From the flames, the brute saw the creature's sword coming in his direction. He quickly managed to defend himself using his knee and elbows. Looking up, he realized the enemy was advancing toward the mage. Right in front of him was the Lamenting Knight trying to grab him. With little he could do, he could only watch the monster approaching. Suddenly, his protective necklace activated an automatic mana barrier to defend him. The creature then struck him squarely, throwing him to the ground and causing a great impact. He then remembered the mayor's warning about mana consumption, but fortunately, he felt no side effect. Even so, he realized that his reserves were almost empty, and his shoulder was dislocated from the last impact. Despite this, the biggest problem still remained before him. Soon the dark armor enveloped the knight's body, making him much stronger. With that, the clerics joined the fight and cast chains of light to restrain him. One of them then commented that this armor was something never before recorded, not even in the church's archives. The brute seized the moment and shouted for the priest to hold on. The creature then used the chains to pull the clerics with force, surprising everyone. With a shout, the big guy grabbed his companions to prevent them from being dragged, questioning if they planned to die. He then ordered them to prepare to contain the enemy again. Seeing the opportunity, the bard prepared a spell to take down the lamenting knight with his performance. Determined to prove his competence, he launched an earth spear at the creature. The skeleton, however, dodged the attack and countered the young man with impressive speed, hitting him in the neck. Seeing his ally get hit, the brute and the mage turned while the cleric was instructed to heal him quickly. Soon the adversary prepared an energy sphere, and the warrior positioned himself to intercept it. With a firm block, he managed to contain it, while his companion watched from behind. The big guy then turned and asked the mage how long he would have to wait. He then clarified that he was waiting for a big attack and asked how long it would take for his mana to recover. With the staff in hand, the conjurer replied that just a few seconds would be enough. The brute then smiled in response. With a shout, he charged at the lamenting knight, asking his ally to prepare. The creature also braced for the impact of the warrior's charge. Soon the fighter shouted his plan to crush the punctured point and asked him to aim his magic there. With that, he ended up injured by a powerful punch directly to the chest. As the blow deepened, the brute declared that a corpse should remain still. His fist then pierced through the knight's body with force. The creature's armor shattered, opening a hole in its chest. From afar, the mage observed the result of the attack, confirming that the plan had worked. The lamenting knight then regenerated his arm and struck the warrior with a single powerful blow. Next, the creature raised its handful of energy to attack the fallen ally. The conjurer then jumped in front of the brute to intercept the blow, declaring that he was its opponent. With that, he noticed that the hole in the creature's chest had not yet closed. He then realized that focusing his magic on that point would be the key to victory. With the conviction that he could defeat it, he dodged the creature's attack with an explosion of fire. Suddenly, he turned and saw the group of adventurers approaching from behind. Soon after, he saw the apprentice preparing a spell with her staff. The wizard then remembered telling the young woman that she had more talent for ice magic, despite her lack of practice. She promised to do her best not to embarrass him, and he praised her for her good work. Back in the present, a powerful fire spell hit the lamenting knight squarely. Seeing the opportunity, the conjurer clenched his fist with energy and declared that victory was theirs. At that moment, an old memory surfaced, showing the promise that he would return to his family. And it was that promise that guided him through countless battlefields, no matter how dangerous they were. With a firm hand on his sword, he led his soldiers to fulfill the oath he had made. Thus, each step taken was to one day return to his homeland under the kingdom's banner. However, upon returning to the castle, he and his men found an unexpected scene. Inside, he presented himself to a superior officer to report his arrival. But in response, the officer merely raised his hand in a gesture for him not to approach. Soon after, he was immobilized by the guards for having discovered a forbidden secret. Because of this, he ended up unceremoniously thrown into a pit full of armor and bodies. Trapped in that place, he realized he could never return home. Still, the desire to return was so strong that the reality around him began to distort. Then, the image of his family and his son, Lorien, flickered before his eyes. Suddenly, the knight awoke with wide eyes coming out of that vision. Beside him, the cleric and the young Iris questioned him to see if he was conscious. As they supported him, they explained that the purge was a success and that the lamenting knight fell just before he fainted. The priest then clarified that the fainting was caused by the medallion, as it emitted the same spirit as the defeated enemy. Even so, he remained silent, still under the effect of the vision of that child. With that, the cleric extended his hand asking for the medallion, warning that the object could be dangerous. However, the knight pulled his hand back and refused the request, stating that he would take care of the artifact himself. Not understanding the refusal, the cleric tried to insist on the unknown dangers of the medallion. But with a firm look, he simply replied that everything would be fine and that there would be no problems. Suddenly, a muscular warrior approached laughing and commented that the reward was modest, leaving the priest embarrassed. Then, changing the subject, the cleric asked about deity, and the man explained that he survived thanks to first aid. Soon after, the survivor got up supported by his staff and commented that it was good news. With the purge completed, he announced to the group that it was time to return as the sun rose on the horizon. Thus, the news about the lamenting knight, an undead who commanded other undead in the Boiron mines, soon reached the city. Upon learning of the incident, the local lord was horrified and hastily ordered the area to be cleaned. Fortunately, none of the adventurers who entered the mines died, and all were able to rest and recover. However, the memory of the deceased knight's memories led the protagonist to isolate himself at the top of a tower that night. With everything that happened, one thing became clear to him at that moment. The incident had made him stronger. Alone at the top of the tower, he concluded that real combat accelerated his growth, even while still being rank 3. and with the mana increased by the ability Challenging the Heavens, he could now use area spells comparable to rank 4. Even so, he raised his hand to the moon, acknowledging that he was still far from reaching his true goal. Soon after, the young man clenched his fist with determination, promising himself that he would not give up until he achieved it. It was precisely for this reason that he obtained the special ability Challenging the Heavens. With the arrival of a new day, the incident in the mines was finally considered over in the city. Thus, the clerics of the Order of Luas decided to remain on site to continue monitoring the mines for safety. Meanwhile, the other adventurers said their goodbyes and set off on their journeys back to their respective areas of activity. On a street in the city, the muscular warrior approached and asked the young mage if he was also about to leave. Noticing that he did not plan to be an ordinary adventurer, the man wanted to know if his destination was the place known as Gray. The warrior then questioned how he expected to make money without knowing Gray, mocking the idea that fame would bring clients. After the young man innocently asked why that wouldn't happen, the man called him a naive mage. He then explained that Gray was a kind of shadow information broker that also organized missions. The mention of missions piqued the young man's interest, who repeated the word to confirm what he had heard. With that, the warrior pointed at him and stated that there were many people who did not follow the rules but sought money and fame. Not understanding the man's intention, the mage asked why he was sharing that information. But with a smile, the warrior replied that they were companions for having survived together, although the assertion was denied. Despite the response, the idea of risking missions with strong opponents represented a clear opportunity for him to grow stronger. At that moment, Iris's voice sounded from a nearby carriage, announcing that they would be leaving soon. Seeing that he did not move, the mage called out to him directly, asking if he was not going with the group. She then scolded him for standing still and reminded him that he was still injured. But with a gentle smile, he simply thanked her for the magic that had been granted to him. Soon after, he encouraged the young woman, stating that with that kind of training, she would master elemental magic without problems. He then revealed that he would not be going with them, as he had a place he needed to go. The news made the girl remember how everything had happened suddenly and how her life had been saved by him. At that time, she learned from him theories and spells that she could not grasp at the academy, but she always knew that the farewell would be inevitable. Still, she did not expect that day to come so soon. Understanding that she had no right to stop him from following his path, she extended her hand to say goodbye. As he shook her hand, the mage bid her farewell, calling her junior and promising that they would see each other again. With one last smile, she kept the promise to herself, waiting for the day they would meet again. Smiling through tears, Iris confirmed that they would see each other next time and promised to become a junior he would be proud of. In a distant place, the scene abruptly shifted to Rovalyn surrounded by an intense aura. Soon after, the mage pinned a man to the ground with a circle of flames and demanded to know why the Black Hour was attacking the Bohemern Magic Tower.
Our video ends here. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye bye.